Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're going to be breaking and entering into abandoned places. I'm sure the owners won't mind. With our urban exploration. So get comfortable, grab your flashlights, and let the darkness take control. This story takes place a little over a year ago, some weekday around midnight in central Ohio. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not particularly religious, nor do I necessarily believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but something weird happened that night that I cannot explain. This story is 100% true, except for a few details that have been changed for the sake of anonymity. Let's call it Wednesday. It was around 5 p.m. and a friend tells me about an abandoned building her friend showed her the day before, and asks if I want to check it out sometime. Of course I do, but being the curious soul that I am, I wanted to go that night, whereas she could not. I asked a few other friends to make the journey with me, and all declined either because they weren't into the whole breaking and entering and trespassing thing, or they were otherwise busy. So I decided to go alone. This isn't something I usually do, as I have a few close friends who are just as experienced as I in the Urbex scene, and the three of us make an excellent team when it comes to stuff like this. I've gone to places alone before, but never with this little research done on the area. I couldn't find anything on the internet about the place, so I decided to say screw it and go, as I'm not one to back down from an opportunity like this. So I grab my bag, flashlight, camera, and I'm on my way. I tell someone exactly where I'll be in case something happens and to call the police if I stop responding for a few hours. I arrive about a mile from the location and start my journey. Most of it is woods and creeks, but the last bit of it is a dilapidated parking lot. I get to the lot and see not one but two buildings to explore. This is turning out to be better than I expected. I choose to go into the building on the left, as it looks more easily accessible, and I start looking for a way in. Around the back, I find some metal stairs that have been overgrown and look like they're close to collapsing, and decide to take my chances and slowly climb them, keeping my eyes on each step to make sure I'm not going to fall through anything. I climb the stairs just fine and go to the second floor. The door is closed, but with a minimal amount of force opens just fine, no padlock or anything. And just like that, I'm in. I look around with my flashlight. This place is in better shape than a lot of abandoned buildings around my location. Part of the roof had been caved in from a falling tree, but everything else looked good. I walk around the entrance room a bit more and realize where I am. There are note cards all over the floor with basic information on people. First and last names, addresses, date of births, diagnosis codes, and inpatient or outpatient with a check next to one. I am in a psychiatrist's office. Nice. I love these kind of places, and insane asylums are some of my favorites to explore. I have a seat and look through some of the patient cards. I look up diagnosis codes and try and get a profile of the person. For no particular reason, just interesting stuff. After a bit of this, I stand up to continue my journey. Now the way this building is set up is basically a giant letter I, with the entrance stairs I used at the bottom, and a boarded up main entrance in the center. The only set of stairs to the first floor are at the top of the I. I look around some of the second floor rooms and don't really see much, mostly empty offices with a chair or lamp in the room. I do, however, find a room that I assume was for children to play in, while their parents were seeing a psychiatrist. It has a sandbox and some toys lying around, but I noticed that someone had taken their time to use the sand to draw a pentagram on the floor, and I chuckled. After seeing everything I needed to on the second floor, I go down to the first. The stairs are steep and winding, but very sturdy, and I check the door to make sure it won't lock behind me and make my way down. The first floor is basically just a long hallway with rooms along one side and a reception area on the other. I start checking out the rooms on the right side, and after a few interesting rooms, break room, kitchen, storage closet with Christmas stuff inside, I come across this office with something interesting on the desk. Before getting to that, I want to pose a question. Why does every abandoned building have Christmas stuff in it? Like seriously, 90% of the buildings I've been to have fake trees, wreaths, garlands, or something like that. What gives? Anyway, back to the show. So, on the desk in this office is a set of post-it notes. On these notes are messages that make me feel a little uneasy, and they go like this. He's planning on letting the hostage out, 4:30. Do we have staff accountability yet? 4:35. Can Officer John escort Jane out the room? 4:42. This is where things got weird, and I snapped a picture and took them on my phone so that I could send them to my friends. As soon as I take the picture on my phone, the entire building begins to shake violently. My first thought was, earthquake. Now, I'm not speaking from experience, but I have to assume an old dilapidated building is not the type of place you want to be in during an earthquake, so I start to make my way out, only this time rather briskly. As I get upstairs, I notice the door I propped open to keep from locking me out was now only slightly ajar. The small piece of metal I propped it open with was nowhere to be seen, although I didn't look very hard. As I'm walking/jogging my way out through this gyrating building, I noticed that every door I had opened upstairs was now closed tight. What the hell? Was someone messing with me? I didn't want to stick around and find out. As I was leaving the larger room I entered through, I noticed the door I came in was shut. I pulled on it, but nothing. The door wouldn't open. Now, I'm pretty calm under pressure, but this one was beginning to be too much. I was starting to freak out a bit, and I made the quick decision to force my way out. Typically, I hate doing any damage to a building I'm exploring and usually try to avoid it wherever possible. But this was a special case. I wanted to get the hell out of there. Kick the door down? I've done it before, but this door didn't seem like it was going anywhere. It opens the other way and was very sturdy. Guess I'm kicking out the press board covering the window next to it. Luckily, these windows were huge and low enough where I could get a foot on the wood. 2 kicks and the wood gives out. The building is still shaking, and I make a hasty getaway down the stairs. This is the part that still spooks me. As soon as my feet hit the ground on the last step, the building stops shaking. Completely. Everything around me was silent. I must have been going crazy. I know what I felt. I know what I saw. I got out of there and didn't look back. A few weeks later, my crew freed up and wanted me to show them the place even after I told them the story. Oddly enough, every other time I've been there, nothing out of the ordinary has happened. I'm not sure what happened nor why, and I'm not one to believe it was a ghost or anything, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't shake me up. Was it just a well-timed earthquake? Possibly. But I heard nothing about it on the news the next day, and nobody else said they felt or heard anything. Any insight, whether it be spiritual, geographic, or anything related, would be wonderful and appreciated. Also, final note, I tried to go back to the building a few months ago, as a colleague and I now dabble in paranormal investigations, and the buildings from these stories were now demolished, both of them. It's quite sad to see them go, but I still can't find a trace of them online. It seems like this was all done rather quickly and under the radar. I was exploring an abandoned multi-level tech school building for fun and creepy sensations about 9 years ago, when I thought I heard voices cooing down from the floor above me. I was already feeling a bit like Diablo, given how many spiders I had to kill just to get where I was. Then a rat fell out of a vent duct behind me, and I realized the voices were the augmented chatter of rodents. The walls were full of them. I mostly poked around and then got the hell out of there. Also eerie on that trip, in the bomb shelter portion of the building, there was a roasting spit that some homeless person had set up, and there was a dog skeleton where the fire would have been. Sad and disturbing that someone would be driven to eat an animal capable of empathy. But desperate times, I suppose. I was 16 years old when I had just gotten my license. It was on a Friday after school and I was hanging out with some of my friends from another school district, my girlfriend and her best friend. We all live in small, rural towns that have absolutely nothing to do in a 40-mile radius except a Walmart in between and a few Sheetz gas stations. Since there was nothing to do, we used to go ghost hunting. It pretty much meant finding abandoned buildings and checking them out. None of us really ever experienced anything supernatural, but it was an interesting time, and it involved doing something with friends. I had seen a house off the highway a few times that I wanted to check out, so I told them about it. They all agreed that it was a good idea. We decided to stop at Walmart on our way to grab a new flashlight, and I wanted batteries for my camera. 2 of my friends and I bought a flashlight and 2 packs of batteries each, and I bought a 4-pack for my camera. We have a habit of keeping the batteries that come with flashlights as emergency backups because they don't seem to last as long. Armed with new flashlights, batteries, and energy drinks, we were more than ready to head to the house. The house was a 2-story one with a basement, all broken down, and was about a half-mile off the highway in the middle of a huge field. You could pretty much see it on the hill the whole hike. Just seeing it standing there with moonlight shining through it was creepy, let alone the idea of going in it. There was also a barn that had fallen down about 50 yards from the right side. The closer and closer we walked, the weirder and weirder it felt. Hair-raising weird. The front porch steps were broken, so we had to climb up to the porch to get in. Stepping over the debris from other people busting the place up, we made our way. On our way through the living room to the kitchen, my girlfriend claimed she felt someone pulling the hood on her sweatshirt, but I was the last person, and I was several feet behind. I figured she was either so scared that she was imagining things, or just saying stuff to try and freak everyone out. We made our way around the kitchen, and were on our way upstairs, when she gasped and spun around, claiming she felt her hood being pulled, and that I was an arse for trying to scare her. I swore it wasn't me, and we continued taking pictures all the way up. We made it all the way to the top of the stairs, and I saw a big hole in the attic, so I started walking towards it to take a picture. I snapped one on the way to it, and then another a little closer. The attic stairs were in a room to the left, and there was a hallway with rooms off to the right. We all went to the attic first to check it out, which was all the way up, and there was an old wooden ladder and a broken crate. We walked back down to the second floor quite disappointed. At that point, I was the only one with a flashlight out, so everyone followed me through the hallway to a room on the end to the left. It seemed really breezy in the room compared to the rest of the house, even though there were broken open windows all throughout. After the last person was about 3 steps in, my flashlight went out. It was still turned on, but it seemed like it went dead. The first thing I thought was, there's no way these brand new batteries went dead in 20 minutes in an LED flashlight. Almost instantly after, I heard someone say, "My phone's dead. Yeah, mine too," from my girlfriend and her best friend. One of my other friends pulled out their flashlight, flicked it on and off, and nothing happened. I pulled my camera from my pocket, took a picture with the hope of maybe catching something weird, but the screen was black, with a flashing, red, dead battery symbol. At that point, we were all weirded out and practically fighting each other to leave. Once we made it to the stairs, the flashlight worked again. My camera had about 3/4 of a battery bar, and the cell phones were able to be powered back on. I got goosebumps and tensed up, and we hastened our pace down the stairs and figured the easiest way out would be through the basement door that we saw under the porch on our way in, since the porch stairs were broken. Sadly, it wasn't the least creepy way. We made our way down through the basement that turned out to be a basic maze and looked like it had been in the Blair Witch Project. We fought our way through the vines that had grown over the door to the outside and made our way from the house. About 200 yards from the house, we heard what sounded like a tin food can being spiked on the ground and then rolling down from the basement steps. I don't even remember seeing a tin can anywhere in the house, and we all began running as fast as we could while being careful not to trip over something in the high weeds. Once we returned to the car, we tried to theorize what the hell just happened, and I started looking through all the pictures. They all just looked like dust particle-ridden pictures of an old house. Except for one. When I snapped the 2 pictures of the attic, the first was just like all the others, but the second had a thick, white smoky mist over the whole. It wasn't cold, just a coolish night, so there's no way it would have been breath mist, and no one smoked. To this day I get goosebumps and a little glassy-eyed every time I look through these pictures. I posted them to a forum for people into the paranormal, and everyone told me I had to make an interesting experience post, and that I'd taken a very interesting picture. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Anyone who is big into paranormal activity is probably aware of a place called the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. It's an old tuberculosis hospital that had a lot of people die in it. Anyway, I did security tour / caboose video work for them for about 2 years, from 2005 to 2007. Now I will say this before this. I did not believe in ghosts, spirits, or what have you. It didn't seem possible, but after working and volunteering there, I left fully convinced. Too many experiences to count, but I'll list the ones that got me the most. One morning, after an overnight tour, as people pay $100 to be allowed to row free in the building and ghost hunt for 8 hours, another security guard and myself were walking through the building, locking all the doors and such so that we could go home. I was walking down the hallway when suddenly out of the corner of my eye I saw something or someone run. That was freaky. What really scared the crap out of me was the fact that I also heard bare feet slap the ground as they ran. We took off after them and should have cornered them, but there was nothing there. Scary stuff. Anyone ever watch Celebrity Paranormal Project on VH1? Well, they came and filmed there. Gary Busey, Hal Sparks, and some other celebrities I didn't know were there for that episode. I will tell you, VH1 rigged the hell out of this place. Most of the stuff that happened on this episode didn't really happen. I won't mention what to spoil anything, but still. What was real scary was after a long 12-hour day of myself PAing on set, I stayed behind to do security. 3 crew members came after hours to check the place out, and I think it was the camera rigging guy that I took. We went into the building on the 3rd floor and sat in the middle of a hallway. We sat there for a while, and I'll never forget, as we were sitting there, I was looking one way as he was looking another. Now I will mention that in this building there are 5 floors, with electricity only running to 2 of them, with the exception of exit signs, fire codes and such, and while I'm looking down the hallway, suddenly, the last room I can see starts to light up from inside. I instantly get up and begin to walk over there. The light in the room was hovering, as if someone had a flashlight and was waving it around. I got about 10 feet from the door and shut it off, so I ran in there and there was nothing. I looked out the window to make sure no one was messing with me and called the other guard in the building, but he was on the 5th floor. Totally unexplainable. But the one thing that to this day gets me the most is something that I actually got proof of. Another night, me and another security guard were wrapping up a half-night tour. Like the full night tour, but only $50 and 4 hours. As we were walking on the 2nd floor, the guard stopped me. We looked down the hallway and saw the interior/exterior doors were wide open. These doors were installed after the current owners bought the place, and they are big, heavy doors that lock, and you can't unlock them from the outside without a key. Anyway, the other security guard swore up and down that he saw a tall, dark figure walk out the door, but I didn't. After a little debate, we decided that maybe it was another security guard and we didn't want to lock him out, so we left the doors open. A few days pass, and while I'm there, I hear two other security guards talking about something they witnessed. When I spoke to them, they told me both the same story, how they both saw the tall, dark figure and went running after it. That's the moment when I suddenly realized that there was a motion detecting camera on the door, so I hit the computer to see what I could find. What I saw was crazy. The door that was shut, out of nowhere, just suddenly swings open by itself and there's no one around. Timecode on the camera showed how the camera would kick on when it's motion detected. Like for a moth or other bug. The door swings open and no one was there. 4 hours passed and the next thing on the camera was the guards running out the door. Scary place, man. I highly suggest visiting it if you get a chance. It was a rainy, drizzly day on a Sunday in April. Me and my guy friend had planned to hang out the day before. We were both the age of 14. I left my house at 10 in the morning because we'd planned to get breakfast and met on our bikes around the corner of a street near my house. And then we left the neighborhood to a different town. I knew my mother probably wouldn't have wanted me to go, but we headed off on our bikes anyway. It took us an hour to get 3 towns over. We got food at some cafe and ended up in a sketchy neighborhood, and we rode our bikes looking for something to do until we stumbled upon an abandoned house. We parked our bikes on the side of the house behind a large bush so no one would see them, and we looked around. It looked pretty broken down and had a creepy look to it. The house had a fair amount of caution and do not enter signs on it, which was enough of a warning for us, but we didn't listen. We ended up trespassing and breaking into the house through a back door that was open. I didn't want to because I was a bit of a scaredy cat and wasn't really into taking risks. I believed we would have gotten into trouble, but we never did, and he forced me to go in. There was a small broken wooden fence that you had to climb over before you were standing on the actual porch where the back door of the house was. The fence was broken, with pieces of wood and glass sticking out, so you had to be careful climbing over it. The house smelt of rotten eggs and mold. I had a pit of guilt and fear in my stomach. I was scared out of my mind and jumped at every little creak and noise that came from the inside of the broken down old house. We looked for anything valuable on the first floor of the house, but there wasn't much. We stumbled up the creaky old staircase that led us to the second floor. I had no intention of following my friend up there though. He went up by himself, and I waited at the bottom. He finally convinced me after much pleading to ascend, so begrudgingly I did. We didn't really find anything that valuable except for some fake jewelry and old pictures of the previous family members who once occupied the abode. And after raiding anything we could, we went back down the stairs. And here's the scary part. We found ourselves searching the bottom half of the house, after finding a few secret rooms we hadn't seen before. I suggested countless times that we should leave before someone found us, or that we got hurt by something, but my friend replied with, "Just give me a minute and we'll leave," which we never did. We stopped dead in our tracks when we heard faint footsteps coming from the upstairs right above where we were standing, and we made eye contact with each other. We were both terrified. After a few seconds, we heard a door slam from upstairs, and we bolted for the back door as quick as we could and slammed it shut behind us. My friend had quickly hopped over the broken fence onto the back porch. He was taller than me, so it was easier for him, but for me, being a much shorter girl, it wasn't easy. I ended up hopping over as fast as I could. Before my other leg was over the fence, I felt something cold brush past my ankle, but I didn't look back. I threw myself over the fence, twisted my ankle and got a small cut on my leg. I limped to the bikes that were behind the bush where we'd left them, and we went off. We both headed straight home after that and decided not to talk about what we saw. When I got home, I noticed that I had a bruise where I had felt that cold breeze as I was leaving the house. And I will never sneak into anywhere abandoned again. In college, a group of friends and I would research haunted/creepy abandoned places and drive out to explore them. We'd often get places from websites, books, hearsay, basically any way we could back then. So it's safe to say that a decent portion of our leads were probably bull or made up. Regardless of that, we explored our fair share of abandoned houses, mental facilities, and haunted areas. Realistically, the biggest danger we ever encountered would have been an angry squatter, but you never know. We did hear a woman screaming for help and what sounded like a gunshot in an abandoned mental facility, but after exploring extensively and finding nothing, someone was just probably messing with us. One time was different though. We'd gotten a lead about a small lake in the middle of some woods, where a large stone was used for rituals. We figured it was probably all BS, but it was close to a good diner, and we figured at worst we'd get a good omelette out of the trip. We got to the forest about dusk and parked the car and headed into the woods. There was a faint footpath that you could tell was used with irregularity. We pressed onwards and knew that we were strapped for time, as we didn't bring any flashlights with us, as we planned to get there much earlier in the day than we did. The forest canopy was making it much darker than it actually was, and we ran into the small lake which we were reading about, but didn't see any large stone or something that might be a centerpiece for the rituals we'd read about. The footpath went deeper into the forest, and we decided to follow it for 5 more minutes before turning back. The path slowly began to ascend a small hill, and in the distance we could make out some dark blobs that appeared to be hovering in a slight haze. Again, it was quite dark at this point, so it was hard to make out exactly what we were seeing. As we approached slowly, we realized the haze was actually a tall chain-link fence. That's not the creepy part though. The part that unnerved us was that the dark blobs were every 10 feet on the fence. There was a dead and decaying dog strung up, attached by a dead snake wrapped around the dog's neck, and through the chain links. The fence was padlocked with a chain, but not very tall. We could have jumped it, but it was dark and we didn't have flashlights. It was on the top of a hill, and we weren't able to make out what was inside the fenced-off area, as it turned into a fairly steep decline. We let fear get the better of us and ran all the way back to the car, sitting in silence the entire drive home. I've always meant to go back to that place, even years later now, but I had such a feeling of sickness and dread that I simply can't bring myself to. It's almost an unspoken rule that none of us even bring the place up with one another. 15 years ago, I was in the Air Force and got assigned to provide mobile security to missiles launch facilities located in Wyoming, Colorado, and Nebraska. Riding around in a Humvee for 12 hours a day, 4 days a week in the middle of nowhere is pretty boring, so we would often go into the many abandoned houses located within our patrol area. One was unlike the rest. It was a red brick ranch-style house that looked like it was built in the 70s and was in decent condition on the outside, for it just to be sitting there with no one living in it. I passed the place every day, so I was pretty confident it was abandoned, but I still waited a few months before going in. One night my curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to stop by and check the place out with my team. It was 1 a.m., so we had to use our mag lights to light our way. We never went into places that were locked, so I was excited to see the back door was wide open and the front unlocked. We also looked in the windows before entering to ensure the place was indeed vacant, since we had to carry our weapons in with us. Upon entering, it was a normal abandoned place, stuff scattered everywhere and dusty as hell. We explore around and find out the place has a basement, open the door, and slowly make our way down into the abyss, shining our lights around. And something catches the eye of one of the guys. He points his light at it, freaking out. It's a human figure standing there with their back towards us wearing a cowboy hat. There's no movement, and then I notice that this person isn't touching the ground, so I point my light up there to see a rope is around their neck and they're hanging by the rafters. We start freaking out, wondering what the hell to do. As we get closer to ensure that it is indeed what we think it is before alerting the authorities, I get within range to knock its hat off with my M4 and meet a burlap sack. Someone thought it would be funny to hang a scarecrow from the rafters, and it did a bloody good job at making us all crap our pants. About 15 years back, a few friends and I broke into an abandoned pathology. It was pitch black in there, so we left on the first day. Nope. The next day around 10 p.m, we went back, geared up to the brim, headlamps, flashlights, chalk, bolt cutter, and backup batteries. The entrance door was 5 meters tall and made out of thick, and I mean thick, like 10 inches thick, of wood. It was unbelievably heavy to open, and made a real deep cracking sound. It was scary as hell, but whatever, we thought to ourselves. The building was a 4-story building, 2 basements, 1 ground floor and then the first. The main corridor was at least 2 meters in length, with about 8 doors on each side and at least 5 meters wide. The ceiling was about 4 meters high. Same thing on the other floor, except the basement, but we'll get to that shortly. The building was huge, big open rooms, but you felt watched in there. The floor in the ground, the first floor, was made out of concrete, and there was not much to see there, just empty rooms and graffiti. The basement were a different story. The ceilings, walls, and floors were tiled, edge to edge. Everything had a white reflective surface. We were scared at this point, but kept on exploring. Remember the chalk we bought? We had it so that we could draw a line on the ground every 2 meters. That way we could quickly find the exit in case of spooky stuff happening. Good luck drawing chalk on tiles. So the first basement was built the same as the first and ground floor. Big rooms, long-ass corridors and high ceilings, but tiled edge to edge. Not much to see there, just some candles and circles made out of roses that were dry, so they had obviously been there for a while. Bit spooky, but no matter, we kept on exploring. Now comes the second basement. This place was pure madness. It was like a maze, no structure at all, as if the architect had a stroke while planning. No room was the same size. The ceiling was maybe 2 meters high and the corridors just wide enough to barely fit 2 people next to each other. Claustrophobic as hell. Some rooms were just squares with doors on each side. There was no reference points, and we had to remember the turns we made and reverse them. 2 left, 1 right, second door left, and so on. Heart pounding and scared crapless. Clear thinking was critical, and every tiny noise there made us hold our breath. I've never felt so helpless before. We made our way through the maze and got pretty good at remembering the place. At one point we all stopped and went silent. There was a huge door with somewhat of a padlock. Should we open it? One of my friends asked. Dunno. What if there are zombies in there? We all laughed, and I pulled out the bolt cutters. It took a few attempts, but we managed to crack the lock open. The room was filled with shelves, and the shelves were filled with files. And the files were probably filled with every person that was ever cut open there. The room was stuffed to the brim with autopsy reports. We packed our stuff and went home. That was enough for us. What gives me chills is that the whole building was empty, but they kept the files? I mean, the building is in use again, still a pathology, but why keep the files there? Even though this story isn't the scariest, I still like to share it from time to time. I really do wonder what they were doing with that still there, and the place in itself was seriously creepy. I was in San Francisco helping out for an online event on one of the beaches a few years ago, and one of the side projects they had going on was clearing this wooded area that was an old bunker hill back before World War I, and I believe was a machine gun post. Needless to say, the main bunker, you only had to slide through the small slit of the structure and it went down to a second level. That was the only way in. So a group of people and I entered and went down what could only be described as a dark hotel corridor with side rooms with a crumbling infrastructure. If this wasn't creepy enough, on the first wall in graffiti was written, "Satan awaits." So we enter, go down to the basement type room, and all the rooms are pretty far gone from age and weathering, when we come upon the room labelled 6, and this room's doorframe was graffitied with a clownesque design, and the only room with some type of graffiti beside the words upstairs, so it's pitch black, and we all have our camera flashlights to see, and this room has 3 voodoo dolls on the wall, with each of them having a 6 in the middle of the body, with the words on the right saying, "Until the light takes us." This sent everyone into, "Hell, I don't want to be here anymore" kind of vibes, so we finished up for the most part and make it down to the end of this winding corridor, where there's a large metal door with a small peephole, and the metal door wouldn't open due to rust. It's just freaking weird. This happened to my sister and brother-in-law. They have a hobby called urban exploration, fancy word for trespassing abandoned buildings. But anyway, they were in this old abandoned nursing home in the middle of the night, just doing what they usually do, looking around, taking pictures of the interesting things that time forgot, and experiencing the adventure of breaking a minor law. At one point, one of them found an old, broken, life alert-ish alarm. Not the exact thing, but same concept. They had some magnetic slip or something and it would go off if one of the old people fell. It was in terrible condition and didn't have any batteries in, but one of their stupid friends picked it up and held onto it for a while. A bit later, they were checking out another area of the home, and there was a heavy steel door closed with a metal hatch in front of the sanitarium section, like the intensive care section or something, and they decided not to go in and to turn around and keep walking, and then heard the loudest blast they've ever heard, and turned around to see the steel door had just bashed open the wrong way. The door was supposed to open inwards, but it had flown open outwards, ripping right through the metal door frame. Needless to say, they got out of there. After they calmed down inside for a while, they decided to go back. They've been doing this for a while, and they don't believe in ghosts. They know there has to be a rational explanation for it, and they're just about to go inside when they hear a loud-ass beeping. They look at their friend who's still holding the powerless, broken alarm, and it's going off like crazy. He throws it to the ground, and the beep starts sounding like screaming, and they get the hell out of there. Some friends and I used to explore abandoned places for fun. We stopped because, hey, well, we could have died. Here are some of our more notable experiences. We explored an abandoned warship once. There was this old shore liner that was used in World War II that was later used as a vacation boat or something. Some old idiot bought it and shored it up in shallow waters, and it was basically left to rot. We had to trek through hillbilly country, and trespassers will be shot signs everywhere. We were definitely trespassing. One time, I thought I could walk right up to it and climb in. The next, the river was really high and we had to wade out to it. That messed with me because we were definitely risking being bitten by snakes or stepping on rust, and the ship itself was rather boring. On another occasion, there was a giant old radio tower / office building. There's a building in my city, all brick, probably 10 stories high in the ghetto, and it was used over the years for all kind of stuff, but it was originally and mainly a building for radio. This thing was gigantic, kind of heavily secured, but we found an open window about a story up and shimmied in off a pipe. Once we got there, it was definitely a feeling of something being off. It was dark, of course, but it was also unsettling. It smelled wet. The story we found ourselves on was what used to be a chapel of sorts. There were a few pews and an old confessional. Church stuff is scary as hell to find in a dark place with a cell phone flashlight, and we continued to look around, and we climbed some stairs into the next story, and were relieved when there was more light. But something was really wrong. It was very clean for an abandoned complex, like no rubble on the floor, no garbage. Weird. And then we kept looking around, when all of a sudden, an alarm sounded extremely loud. Right when one of us saw a bobcat, the machine, not the animal, and the alarm went off. Easily the scariest moment of my life, and we took off with a singular pack mentality running for the stairs. but they were bricked in. Afterwards, we all agreed, in our collective panic, that we had the thought that hobos had walled us in quickly and quietly, as hobos do. We were wrong. We just went down the wrong stairs, and ended up leaping from the window we came through and getting away with a few bruises. Damn, what a rush. The next story was from a place that was most certainly haunted. Or, ghosts aren't real, but there was definitely a body crammed somewhere within this place. Allow me to elaborate. So, in a different terrible part of town, there was this abandoned apartment complex that used to be a school. Brick with wrought iron interior gates, wrought iron on the windows, etc. This place used to be a pretty secure building. Did I mention it was huge? Anyway, we shimmy into another window. A woman screams that she was going to call the cops from her double wide right beside this place. So that set the scene to be a little nervous. We get in and instantly I'm like, what is this feeling? Dust was everywhere, odds and ends from everyday life. It was like we entered into someone's old apartment. We carry on. The atmosphere wasn't comforting, but I ignored it. Like I said before, the hallways/stairwells have these massive wrought iron gates and tile floors. Nice plaster molding, hardwood pillars. I doubt it was very hoity-toity. But I'm also surprised these nice, older world details survived from the crackhead looters in the area. The hallways were very vast, and we all find gunshot holes here and there. Same people would be like, screw that, but when you're exploring, you're like, yay, danger. So we explore a few apartments and I go off on my own for a bit, into a closed apartment because I have absolutely no brain cells, and the first thing I notice are photos, Polaroids, all over the floor. And then it hit me that this place seemed to have been pretty hastily evacuated. And I don't know how to rationally describe it, but I feel like if I held up a ghost sensor thing to these photos, it would have exploded. We left not long after, fearing Trailer Lady would make good on her promise to call the police, and I'm glad we did. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed tonight's installment. If of course you did, you should definitely like, subscribe, press the bell icon and do the 500,000 things the YouTube algorithm expects for the video to receive slightly more views than it already does. Oh, the algorithm really is a pain. I would love it if my videos hit 100 views each time. I mean, wouldn't everyone? It's just, I don't know. I really want this channel to keep growing. There's just not that much interest in horror narration, sadly. Maybe I should collaborate with random people outside the community, see if anyone wants to get into the spooky spirit. In fact, now that I said it, do any of you have any suggestions? Anyone you think would want to work with a narration channel for Halloween? Think about it, guys. Post it in the comments section. Anyway, I hope everyone is good. Huge thanks as always to my amazing members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen. You guys are amazing and I love each and every one of you, even if you aren't a member or patron or anything. You're just amazing. Thank you for supporting the channel and watching my videos. It really means a lot and I couldn't ask for more, especially sticking around to the end to hear me. I think I'm going to wrap things up now. Huge thanks to Leonora for featuring in today's video. You might have heard her breathing at some points. Stay awesome, everyone. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.